So when Ulrike, Stefan and I talked about it, of course I wanted to present some stuff from my earlier works in the context of Slovenian diaspora in Argentina. So basically I'll just briefly explain and then go into the art, especially visual art, or visual artists in Argentina. My research subject was the Slovenian diasporic community in Buenos Aires and in some other places in Argentina that was constructed after the Second World War, and they are very closely linked to the social memory or let's say memories and experiences of violence. They actually put let's say violence or memory of violence into the core of the explanation of why they are in Argentina and so on. So it was a diaspora that was constructed after the Second World War by refugees from Slovenia who were exiled during the very last few weeks of the war, and they were exiled or they escaped, more correctly, they escaped because of the fear of the communist revolution in Yugoslavia, because also many of the prominent members of this refugee group were collaborating with the German occupying army during the war. So basically the let's say constitution of this diaspora was heavily reliant on ideas of violence, war, and some other idea that I will not present today, like homeland. And of course, because it was constructed as a very interconnected community, it also had influence on the artists, and the artists, of course, also influenced the recreation of these ideas of violence and war. So the social memories that I call these social or collective memories of violence, especially war and after-war executions that took place in Yugoslavia, were produced and reproduced in very diverse diasporic contexts and are still being reproduced continuously. So in rituals, at cultural events, in Slovenian schools, in various kinds of imagery of home or past or Slovenia, or in very diverse contexts. Also, in diaspora, there is a strong ideology of maintaining the language as means of identity. So, because of that, and because the idea that they should be, let's say, creative, there is a lot of various kinds of musical, artistic creativity. So just briefly, music is very important, especially singing in choirs. It already starts in Slovenian schools, but there are also other contexts like different bands, churches, at mass, and so on. So the idea of music is on the one hand connected to the idea of maintaining the language, and on another hand on the idea of singing folk songs or traditional Slovenian songs, which are of course reinvented in this place. Then music is also very connected to various cultural events and to performances. So very diverse occasions. There are different performances like exile are present in very diverse levels of artistic creativity. So, for example, in literature, there is a lot of literature that was written and published also in Argentina with accounts of war, with let's say accounting on the history, and there are of course some literature which is not basically accounts of event, but the general production on, let's say, suffering, especially in poems, suffering and in novels and so on. So the themes of violence and war and suffering and torture and stuff like that and killing appear quite a lot. And of course, I want to focus on the visual art. So the visual art is the least, let's say, the least integrated into the political dimension of this community. So if the political elite in the community had a lot of influence on the programs of what should be created or what should be written about, or what should be especially published, the political elite of the community had the least influence, but still they had some influence, least influence on the visual art. So there was a program called Art School and the Slovenian Culture Action, which is a cultural program enabling different artists and writers and poets to publish and to exhibit, and this was even established as a response to the very close, ideologically very close community, but then it was later integrated in the community. So they also adopted some of the recurrent themes that emerge here, like violence and so on. So I'll just show a couple of pictures from some of the most prominent artists. This is Marian Brun with a gallery that is established in La Boca in Buenos Aires. Marian Brun is a very peculiar case for me because he has been part of the community, and he has also on several occasions he has been integrated, but also he has pushed himself out of the community. So for quite a few years he didn't want to participate, and he was always quite critical about the community, but still participated sometimes, especially in the last 2 decades with his work. So he's a very renowned artist, and only one part of his works, paintings and sculptures, are connected to memories of violence, and it is important to know that these parts of his work were done when he was invited by the Slovenian Culture Action Program in the night to exhibit in Slovenia in 1994. So he went to Slovenia as a member of the Slovenian Culture Action to show. They invited the most prominent artists, also another Andrea Dolina, for example, was invited to participate in this exhibition. So they were, let's say, sent or invited to Slovenia to show the cultural productivity of the Slovenians in Argentina. And at that time, so he reflected more than earlier, he reflected on the issue of violence and made some very explicit pictures and sculptures that are connected to this war period. Partly some of it is connected to migration, like these pictures from refugee camps where he grew up, and some are connected to not so much to war events, but to executions and hidden barriers after the war. Just a few depictions of these executions and so on. So I'm not so much interested, as we talked earlier, about how ethnographically to approach it. I'm not so much interested in context, or how it is reimagined with regards to various social and historical contexts, especially, of course, the fact that he was also an artist who was quite established in the diaspora in Argentina. And when we talked about his work, he narrated why some of his works were done in the way they were done. So he has said that he had done these paintings and sculptures in memory of those soldiers, home guard soldiers who were executed after the war. Okay, so another painting by Margarita Maria Dolina, and it is named Slovenian Guernica. Of course, this is the Picasso Guernica was often, very often reimagined and recreated. I googled a little bit a few days ago how many Guernicas there are, and there are many, many, many. So even recent that depict violence in Syria and stuff like that. So why is this painting so powerful, and what can it tell us? So my question would be, why this painting, the image so powerful, and what can it tell us about how people remember or experience or adopted memories of violence? Okay, just another one, an engraving of the exile. There are so many of those visual representations that appear in various forms. Also, many of the literature, some of the literature and some texts are accompanied by such representation. For example, this is taken out of the newspaper Free Slovenia, and it was attached to the invitation to a ceremony of annual memorial of the victims of communist revolution. So this kind of images often appear, and this is also why I think that various levels of art, such as literature and visual art, can be combined in our analysis. Okay, so okay, let's keep this. Some narratives of these executions and wars and so on are often very important. I'll skip some of this part. And one of the interlocutor, Andrea, told me that basically at the beginning of the art school in Slovenian Culture Action, the artists were supposed to depict, she said, beauties of Slovenian landscape, or to explore memories of the Slovenian tragedy. So these were the two recurrent themes, and of course artists were more or less free to do that, but of course free to do that within a certain context of social historical context. And she said, me and other artists have two paths to work in the Slovenian community. On the other hand, we also create an exhibit in Argentina. So there is this ambivalence or ambivalence that is present in many of the artists. For example, another artist that talked about how this social historical context is, of course, also very restrictive to the creation, and in turn she said that it was art that liberated her from the Slovenian community, because she completely disregarded the main themes that were supposed to be done. So art was in this sense, producing artworks, but not producing artworks that are connected to violence or war, were for her very important. Okay, landscape was another one. This. Okay, so then younger artists are also these images of violence, but are more connected to the Argentinian history. Some of them reflect on the dictatorship, and some explore some other more contemporary stuff. For example, this is an artwork that cannot stand alone without the explanation of the artist that produced it. And of course, we can think of anything with this stuff. But when I was shown by an artist called Cesar, when I was shown this picture, I mean the painting, no, the picture, sorry, he explained, he was also of Slovenian origin but did not really participate in this Slovenian community, but he explained that he had done this in memory of his friends who were killed in the Falklands War. But he said that it only, well, these were more or less his explanation, that he only understood his own works when he visited Marian Grum, which I mentioned in the beginning, and his much more explicit exploration of the sense of violence. So basically it means that these works can be either very explicit or much less so, but that interpretations are very open, and of course these interpretations are what I'm interested in, the interpretations in the contemporary time, not only for the history. So another piece of art by Marian Grum on violence shows very clear appropriation of some topics that Radovic just explained, and how Marian Grum saw this topic of oppression and genocide in Argentina. Okay, so maybe how much? So I'll just try to wrap it up with perspective on violence. So how to approach violence in this topic that is very vague, very unclear, and subjected to different interpretations. In anthropology, I'll just mention a couple of main authors. For example, David Ritchie, who defines violence as an act of physical hurt linked legitimate by the performer and illegitimate by some witnesses. So the issue of legitimacy and illegitimacy, or the production of legitimacy and so on, is something that goes on all the time with regards to, let's say, memories or representation of memories in artistic forms. Schroeder and Schmidt also adopted Ritchie's definition, and they wrote that, or they focused on the observable performance or acts of violence against others who are subjected to that violence, and they listed three main approaches. The first is operational approach, which is basically the top-down approach, or that focuses on the antagonism, especially on the material and physical causes of conflict. Then the cognitive approach, how ideas of violence are culturally constructed within a given social context. And the experiential approach, how violence is related to individual subjectivity. So I was more focused on this second and third aspects of how ideas of violence are constructed within a given social historical context, and how they are also related to the construction of identity in this on the individual as well as group level. So some other points that Schroeder and Schmidt listed is that violence is never completely idiosyncratic. It is always a kind of relationship, and this relationship is also processual. So in the sense that it remains a relationship even after the violence with the memories of violence. So the relationship is being reconstructed all the time with such narratives, and that So it is never disassociated from instrumental rationality. Violence is a product of social and historical process. It is an assertion of power, and it is rational, at least on one level, within a given context. And for example, most of the studies on violence are done, of course, among the victims. Repič wrote about the triangle of violence, the actors, the victims, and the observants. And most of the studies are done among the victims, and of course, it is then much more difficult to grasp the rationality of the performers. However, this is not my aim. My aim is basically to see, to look at the discourses and to look at the violent art production as a way of legitimizing art production, of producing illegitimacy of violent processes. Okay, and some results. Violence is stored in collective memories and can be reproduced continuously, and it also reproduces strict polarization of the narrative. So violence often reproduces this idea that something is very strictly polarized on the level of victims and on the side of the perpetrators. It also appears to often induce some sort of principle of totality, in the sense that this, for example, in this case, that violence or memories of violence have to be reimagined and maintained in order for the community as it is to be established or to be preserved, because it is how to say, some sort of there is some sort of idea that this violence was the reason to establish the community. I'll conclude with one more thing. I even heard a very interesting interpretation the last time that I was in Argentina. One of the Slovenians said that repatriation and mass execution were also perpetrated not only by the communists, but also by the leaders or the political elites of the Slovenian community, because they knew that after repatriation people would be executed, and didn't stop this repatriation from refugee camps in Austria, because this was the interpretation that I was thinking about, because that would enable them to point to their let's say rationality during the war or after the war of being against communism, and that would also enable them to construct a strong political opposition from the outside. So I'm not completely inclined to this interpretation, but still it is an interesting thing to talk about. So sorry if it was a bit more confusing, but
thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Okay. I was interested in hear that especially in the early 1980s.
Thank you. This is a very good observation. So I wasn't sure if I'm going I'm still not sure if I'm going too far by including some paintings that are done with relationship to the dictatorship period and violence during that period. I don't know. The answer is I don't know, but I assume that this is something that we could follow with ethnographic exploration of the social historical context in which these artists produce their artworks. How much does the contemporary result of being engaged in Argentinian art world by producing images that are now very important also in Argentinian art worlds, I mean being socially engaged and critical to let's say dictatorship and so on. How much is there any relationship to the fact that for example this particular artist was brought up in a community where violence was always there, the memories of violence or the discourses of violence was always there, but on the other hand he also disassociated himself from the community in the sense that he didn't want to reproduce images that older community artists produced. So I think this is the space for further investigation, but I can't draw any single conclusions at the moment.
Okay, we have two more questions, one by Ulrike and one by
My question mark relates to violent imageries. And you say strict polarization in principle of totality. Totality is always a very intriguing and definitive statement. So I'm curious, what do you say that this all violent imaginaries are polarized and relate to the totality of what they say, as about or relate to, or does it apply only to certain types of violence, like the dictatorship? Or would you know, as I'm just curious, would the guerrilla or also the producership polarized issue? I'm questioning. I don't know. I can't answer either. But will I understand you correctly?
These were some of the characteristics of violence that were listed by Schreber and Schmidt, and the totality of violence. They listed it as something that appears in narratives about violence, in the sense that in particular social historical context, it appears to have effect of totality effect of totality or a sense that everything is connected to particular violent events.
Yeah.
Everything, from identity, from culture production, and so on. Of course, this is the idea that was also enforced by some of the political elite, but not necessarily accepted by people reimagining these years and years
Okay.
later.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. My question refers to two concepts. One is representability or non-representability. The other refers to formalistics. The first one is there's an American folklorist called Stuart Blackburn, and he studies theater, expression of tragic events in the past in the form of theater. And in this particular, there's a South Indian theater. There's a position. People cannot continue the tragic event on the stage, because when it comes to this tragic moment, then the actors as well as those who are watching, they get possessed. What this says is that you cannot express anymore. This event was such a tragic, the intensity is such that you cannot So this is a question of non-representability or non-representability of a tragic event. So if you're reducing it to something, maybe you're cheating. Okay. The second one is this formalistics. I have seen this Rimzon, this Indian guy, who made did an exhibition on this tragic event of the destruction of Babri Masjid. This is a mosque by this Hindu radicals in 1991. But when I was seeing his exhibition, I could see that's not coming directly from Babri Masjid. It must be coming from somewhere. There's a voice, like his favorite. So this work, particular work, is memory of actually many things. So these are the things.
Yeah, this is a very interesting comment or question. I would, let's say, answer or I would think about the standardization of representation. So there is, of course, a strong level of standardization of memory that happens within the specific social context. Of course, led by the political elite of the community and the infrastructure that enables them this standardization, which of course doesn't account for all those people and all those production that was outside of this framework. But within the framework there was this standardization of memory, of past, of interpretation, as to very simple question, why we are in Argentina. Then it's much easier to reproduce this visually or also to immediately when you see a painting to think about, to see that it is a representation of this standardized history. What happens with those images that are not part of this standardization? They are much more vague in interpretation, also interpretation by their own producers.
I think we've come to the end.
There was one more question we have.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can read quick responses. I think that you're dealing with two different generations. The older one that reflects what happened after the Second World War, and the younger generation. Are they anyhow connected? Do they cooperate together in terms of representation of violence? They are completely separate.
Yes, they are connected in the sense that most of those some of the painters and so on were already among the let's say refugees, the migrants who came to Argentina, and they when the community was established and this Slovenian culture action was established, there was also an art school, visual art, fine art school for fine art. And they influenced, it is interesting that for example, Barbara Reynolds was a very important figure there, and she influenced a generation of artists, about 10 of them. But her influence was basically was very broad, so she adopted themes from Argentina, like original painting styles and topics that were connected to the original people. However, they were still working within a certain context where it was very important to reproduce history of what had happened to them. So there were different layers of influences. And the younger artists now, so basically those artists, Marian Grum, Andrea, Margarita Dolina, these were artists that were brought up in Argentina very soon after the war. And the younger artists that are, let's say, 30 years now, or 40, between 30 and 40, they have disassociated more from these topics than the third generation of artists. So, of course, there are generational differences, absolutely.
Thank you.
making a bit longer break.